From the CUBE studios in Palo Alto and Boston, bringing you data-driven insights from the CUBE and ETR. This is Breaking Analysis with Dave Vellante.
Over the course of the past 2 years, we've been laying the groundwork for understanding the impact AI has on the enterprise software stack. Now, we've tried to cut through the agent washing and highlight the prerequisites for agentic AI success. Now, we've discussed the progression of the data stack beyond separating compute from storage and emphasized the importance of separating compute from data, bringing any engine to any data, underscored by open table formats like Iceberg and its potential unification with Delta. We've also discussed the need to unify metadata and the shift of control from the database layer up to the governance layer of the stack and how that piece of the software framework is opening up. Think Unity and Polaris. This all builds on the work done early on by Zhamak Dehghani with data mesh as an organizational construct for breaking data silos. Earlier this year, our research focused on configurable business processes in the form of metadata using the Salesforce Data Cloud as an example, and more recently harmonizing not only data, but also shared business logic with examples such as Celonis and Palantir, and of course, relational AI. Now, some believe the year of agentic AI will come to fruition in 2025. Rather, we believe bringing these capabilities together is a complex task and a decade-long journey, and there is no shortcut on the yellow brick road to agentic AI realization. Hello and welcome to this week's theCUBE Research Insights powered by ETR. In this breaking analysis, George Gilbert and I look back and piece together previous research, leading us to a dramatic change in the enterprise software stack. We'll explain how we see the journey playing out, the critical pieces of the emerging enterprise software architecture, and the high-value pieces of real estate in that system that are still taking shape. George, thanks for your time and your research. Great to see you again.
Great to be here, Dave.
Okay, AI is the catalyst and is disrupting an enterprise software stack that is 5 decades old. Many believe this AI era is the most profound we've ever seen in tech, and we agree and liken it to mobile's role in driving on-prem workloads to the cloud and disrupting traditional IT. But we see this as even more impactful. However, for AI agents to work, we have to reinvent the software stack in our view and break down 50 years of silo building. The emergence of data lakehouses is not the answer in and of itself, as they're just a bigger siloed asset. Rather, SaaS, as we know it, we think, is going to have to be reimagined. Now, 2 prominent CEOs agree with us. At the recent reInvent conference, we sat down with Amazon CEO Andy Jassy, and here's what he had to say about the future of SaaS. Take a listen.
I'll say supply chain is another area that we think we can be very effective in. We have a lot of experience, just like customer service there. But I also believe that AI is going to open up all sorts of new SaaS opportunities and software as a service opportunities. I've been saying this for a long time. I've told you guys this too, which is that I think every single SaaS company and application that we know of will be reinvented with what's available in the cloud. And I think that's doubly true when you think about what AI allows.
And Satya Nadella on the BG2 podcast recently went into more depth that we're going to unpack. Please play the clip.
Notion that business applications exist, that's probably where they'll all collapse, right, in the agent era. Because if you think about it, right, they are essentially CRUD databases with a bunch of business logic. The business logic is all going to these agents. And these agents are going to be multi-repo CRUD, right? So they're not going to discriminate between what the backend is. They're going to update multiple databases and all the logic will be in the AI tier, so to speak. And once the AI tier becomes the place where all the logic is, then people will start replacing the backend.
Now, George Jassy, from his comments, sees cloud plus AI as the transformative catalyst. And Nadella, he talked about multi-repo CRUD databases. CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete, with the logic in the AI tier. And when he talks about replacing the back end, Nadella, like Jassy, envisions a sea change in SaaS, but add some color to this and perhaps what's missing in the narrative.
Well, this is what Nadella is talking about is really a 10-year vision with no intermediate steps on the way. Someday we may have the technology to put all the deterministic rules and logic that constitute an application today into a non-deterministic neural network in the form of an agent. We do not have that technology today. And so there are many steps in between where we are today and getting to the vision Nadella talked about. And we're going to go through those. I think what he's saying, though, basically, he's saying that we can kneecap every SaaS app and turn it just into its database schema. And if we do that, we'll have another Tower of Babel with a bunch of agents that don't know how to talk to each other, even though the vision is that the agents can talk across the databases. Now, what we're going to lay out is the steps we think we need to get to or go through to get to that vision.
Okay, so let's pick up at the starting point from where we are today, which is the current modern data platform, modern data stack, MDS, some people call it. A couple of years ago, we started talking about the 6th data platform beyond the 5 modern existing data platforms typified by Snowflake and Databricks. And this is data from ETR, our partner, which shows net score or spending momentum on the vertical axis and overlap or penetration into a data set of more than 1,700 IT decision makers. This is the October data. Get a quick look at the January data, which is in the field, and it's still pretty close. It's a couple of changes that we'll talk about later on, not in this segment, but next year. Now we're plotting Snowflake and Databricks along with Google, AWS, and Microsoft. And we also show Oracle for context as the legacy database king. And the red dotted line there at 40% indicates a highly elevated net score. Now we've annotated Microsoft and Oracle because they're in the data game, but they're not really considered representations of the modern data stack per se. But we're not here to debate that today. We show this because these are the players that are squarely in the mix of this transition. They have a lot to gain and there's a lot at risk. But the starting point on our stroll down the yellow brick road is just that, the modern data stack as we laid out at the top. The journey started in the cloud with cloud data warehouses, separating compute from storage, typified by Snowflake's innovations. Now, as we've been reporting, there's a shift underway from the point of control at the database layer toward the governance catalog, which is shown here as the operational metadata, which begins to lay the foundation for a new application platform. Horizon from Snowflake and Polaris, its open source catalog, Unity from Databricks, which they've open sourced, and other legacy governance platforms like Informatica and Calibra and Elation are all in play here. And firms are thinking differently about organizing around data with data mesh, as you see on the road here, data products thinking, data as products, and leveraging data about people, places, and things in a distributed organization, digital representation of a distributed business. And where it really starts to get interesting is the movement toward incorporating business processes and harmonizing data and processes such that swarms of agents can work together and with humans toward an outcome. George, take us on this journey and add some color, no pun intended, on this yellow brick road to how you see this playing out.
All right, it's a very colorful picture. And let's just start at the cloud data platforms. We first talked about this with separating compute. Well, the original cloud data platform, Snowflake, separated compute from storage. Then we separated compute from data. And as you were saying, we had the open table format, so multiple compute engines could get at the data. And that meant you had to have separate metadata, technical and operational things like lineage. That's the foundations for the data pipelines that created data products, such as what is a customer, what is a product, what is a lead. But those are static entities. Now, if you wanted to do something like track the customer's journey from like prospect or from their engagement to prospect, to a lead to conversion, you're trying to simulate capturing the business process but you're doing it using business process metadata, where you have a static representation of the process and you can configure it for each customer. So there's only so far you can bend it. That's what Salesforce has done with Data Cloud, which is actually way ahead of all the other data platforms, at least for customer data. It's a way of representing customer 360 and the customer journey in a harmonized way so that you can get at it analytically and with applications, and it has meaning that all these applications can share. You're not just sharing tables, you're sharing a customer and their journey. But there's one big step farther, and this is the one that's the hardest, which is where you don't just have a static picture of the metadata, but you actually share the business process logic in a harmonized way across these applications, because that gives you the ultimate flexibility in how you can customize something. And then agents can talk across all the customer 360 and the customer journey, and they are talking the same language. You cannot do that until you have this harmonized process logic. Otherwise, you've got agents talking to tables that are essentially scattered. Like JP Morgan might have 6,000 tables that refer to customer. You're going to have a Tower of Babel, and it just does not work. So this ties back into Nadella's claim, where he said we're just going to have a bunch of SaaS apps that are schemas. And that again goes back to, well, 6,000 tables that have a reference to customer in them. We do not have the technology anywhere on the horizon to harmonize that in the AI agent. We need to harmonize that symbolically so that the agents then can all talk the same language. That's the key point. And that's what's going to get us to agentic automation. Maybe sometime in the future, we can get to the point where we can discard this logic.
So what we're trying to do today is build upon more than 24 months of research that George and I and some of the rest of the team here at theCUBE Research have done. And so in case you haven't seen every episode of Breaking Analysis, we're trying to connect the dots. So let's look at how the software stack is changing. This is something that we showed earlier this year. And so, you start at the bottom, AWS kind of is the representation of that cloud infrastructure and kind of, won that game, or at least set the table, for that and for others like Google and Microsoft to join in. And of course, later on, or Oracle with OCI, et cetera. And then Snowflake, as George was saying, popularized the separation of compute from storage. That gave us kind of essentially infinite capacity as the cloud data warehouse. Databricks came in, and really focused on the data science and the data pipeline, and kind of dominating that piece of the world, and affecting this move toward open table formats like Iceberg. Of course, they bought Tabular and are now bringing together, unifying Delta and Iceberg. So that's something that we're looking forward to. You saw some announcements from Amazon at reInvent that also around S3 tables and open table formats, with the intent being read-write capabilities to other governance platforms and to their governance platform. And then, so the point is, and it's highlighted here on the left-hand side of this chart, the shift of control from the DBMS to the governance layer. Now, the conundrum is that governance layer increasingly is becoming open source. So it's the source of value is shifting up to that green layer. So you've got the semantic layer, which is a term that sometimes, we don't like, is sometimes misunderstood, but this ability to harmonize data, and as George was just saying, the really new piece that we've done in our research, or emphasized in our research, is that business process piece. It's not just the data, it's also the business logic and the business process. And then the new source of competitive value seen here up the stack. We're seeing many players, Salesforce, George mentioned, Palantir, Celonis, and others are participating. You're creating a new dynamic across the ecosystem, in a particular new competitive environment. So George, I wonder if you could add some color and give us your thoughts on this shift.
Well, we focused the wars this year in the data platform space, where we sort of began our focus, was all about the shift from the DBMS and its control of storage to the new source of truth, because once you opened up the table format, you couldn't rely on the DBMS to tell you the state of the tables, because the table had to belong to something else if other engines were going to read and write to it. And so that point of control became the catalog, the operational catalog. And Unity from Databricks, which they introduced actually in 2023 at their conference, looked like a very strong contender, and it still looks like a very strong contender. They got a little bit out over their skis in promising that, well, that this year that they were open sourcing it. That's a statement of direction. It's not really all there yet. However, they do execute really fast, and it turns out what we thought was going to take a long time from in terms of unifying Iceberg and Delta is going to be done in Q1. Or so we are told. That's a radical acceleration of that unification. And then the Horizon catalog, which is the new source of truth for the Snowflake ecosystem, that's still on top of the Snowflake engine, but it synchronizes with Polaris, which allows them to apply governance to the open Iceberg ecosystem using the governance policies they set in Horizon. But the next layer up is to add the data semantics for things, for customers, products, leads, campaigns. That's that first part of the semantic layer. The much, much harder part of the semantic layer is when you're harmonizing the processes, because that takes a change in databases that that's 50 years in the making. That's when we get to the agent part.
So let's paint a picture of what the stack looks like at a steady state. It kind of evolved from on-prem to the cloud with IaaS, which took away a lot of that heavy lifting, or at least some of it, as we're showing here, and that extended to PaaS and SaaS, again, as shown here, where more and more of the infrastructure activities and that sort of what Amazon calls the undifferentiated heavy lifting were managed. But it's that green layer up top again where this new value add is emerging. And we show 3 layers here: the digital representation of a business, the agents, and a new layer of analytics that is guided by top-down organizational goals that it can interpret them and then adjust based on changes in the market or guidance from humans in the loop to deliver bottoms-up outcomes by working with other agents and, again, working with humans and taking action in a governed manner. So, George, explain how you see this emerging enterprise stack playing out.
It's interesting. It makes this new set of layers that are integrating all the silos we've been building for the last 50 years, the silos of applications and data. It makes it clear that we can abstract them and turn them essentially into sediment, which is what Nadella was talking about, only he's talking about doing it at the data layer, and we're talking about doing it at the application logic layer, where you need the logic to host the agents. But that's a technology-centric point of view. That's like, oh, well, it seems like the next cool thing to do. But there's a business imperative behind this, which is the axis of competition for companies is going to be how well they can align all their end-to-end operations along a common set of plans, all the way from 3-year assumptions about demand and how to shape it, all the way down to, as Amazon is doing today, how to pick, pack, and ship an individual order in order to fulfill a set of goals that are aligned with those 3-year assumptions. In other words, the goal of the function of management has always been about planning and aligning and allocating resources across timescales, across geography, but we never had the software to make it possible to do something all the way from 3 years out to 1 minute, into the future. And that's why we need this end-to-end integration. And you can't do the agents if you don't have that harmonized digital representation of the business as the foundation. because then the analytics on top can't orchestrate and align all that agent activity that has to happen, not just in silos, but in collaboration with humans. This is the new management artifact. Management becomes more and more of an integrated software system. It's an evergreen capital project that is never done. You're just always improving it. It's not just tacit knowledge that's in the heads of a team of managers, but you're starting to convert that into a software product that gets ever more integrated.
So George, let's zoom in a bit on some of the high value pieces of the stack that we've highlighted previously, but I think are worth reviewing here. So we've got back-end connections into the analytic and operational systems here. We're showing at the bottom, tapping into that business logic that's been trapped in these apps and trying to make it more real time, as opposed to, for instance, in the analytic systems, it's a analytic system, or it's a historical system of truth. But as soon as it's moved into that data lakehouse, it's out of date. So we're trying to make this more of a real-time system. The two layers highlighted in red, the unifying layer to harmonize data and business logic, and then you've got an agent control framework that orchestrates and communicates across agents, again, with humans. And very importantly, it interprets the top-down goals. We're showing that in the upper left, this sort of hierarchy of goals. Might be a high-level goal like, gain market share, and it might put in constraints about, margins or pricing and the like, or maybe pins on some revenue target for the quarter. But the agents can understand that and then execute on bottoms up actions within those guidelines and those top-down frameworks, working with other agents and working with humans. George, could you again please explain this in more detail, how you see this evolving?
So this is really critical because the metric tree is, as you said, it's a set of business goals from at the very top, the forward-looking ones, all the way as you go down the tree, the more technical and operational representation of the state of the business. But these are not just dashboards, nor are they sort of backward-looking. It's not a reporting system. These are the dials on your management system. And so you have to learn the relationships between them. You have to learn over time that moving certain market demand shaping activities influences sales, and you learn how it influences that. And you can only do that when you have a platform that is process-centric and that is predictive, so that it learns. Essentially, you're making predictions, you're conducting experiments or business activities, and then there are models that link these metrics, and they learn how the behavior works over time. And then as that happens, your agents are trained and they run their inference, which is the techie word for operation. There's the design time, which is training, and inference, which is operation. They need those learned business process metrics to know what type of job they're doing, to how to learn from the effects of their actions. And so those business outcomes in the metric tree are they are a representation of that harmonized data, but it's more than harmonized data, it's the harmonized business processes. And for all the hundreds of agent companies being funded right now, there is a lot less focus on the fact that this framework against which they will train and operate is actually the much scarcer real estate. In fact, as we like to say, this is the most valuable piece of real estate in enterprise software for the next 10 plus years. And there might be hundreds of agents, but in any one company, there's only going to be a couple of these business process platforms.
So I want to pick up on something you said about learning, and this is a conversation we've had in previous episodes of Breaking Analysis, and I think we used, I think it might have been a Microsoft example, where the agents ran into an exception, and that exception required human intervention. We were using an example, I think, of a laptop for onboarding a new employee, but that employee needed an iPad or something like that, or you know, something smaller and more agile, and that wasn't part of the the workflow. So there had to be an exception, which involved a human approval. But the point we made at the time, and I want to emphasize this, is those agents will learn from the reasoning traces of the humans, and then incorporate those learnings into the future examples. And the next time that exception occurs, they'll be able to handle it without the human intervention.
You're emphasizing, yes, one of two ways they learn. One is when they can't finish a task and they need the human supervisor to help edit essentially the plan. And so they learn from that. And then there's the other one, which is they're trying to figure out, let's say, a demand shaping activity with a prospective customer, and they're measuring how they move one of these metrics. Both of those are teachable moments that make the agents smarter over time. And yes, you highlighted one that I left out.
Let's take a look at, here some of the players that we see participating in this new world. The bottom layer, which is the data platform folks that we're showing here, like Snowflake and Databricks, are clearly leading, you know, that movement. And that can represent the business entities, and firms like Relational AI and Celonis and Enterprise Web is another one, are building cross-silo capabilities, which we show there as sort of the business process layer. And then you got Palantir, Oracle, Salesforce. They're harmonizing the business processes, but within their own silos. And you move up the stack to the agentic orchestration. We show here Google, Microsoft, UiPath is in that mix. And presumably AWS is going to be playing a role, certainly, most certainly, in this stack, based on some of the things we saw and heard at re:Invent. George, you have a keen sense of this. You've spent a lot of time, you know, researching deeply into the supply chain or the value chain, if you will, of the enterprise software stack. Any additional thoughts here?
Yeah, Alex, maybe if you bring that slide back up again, let me talk to a couple points to add to Dave what you said, which is that it's profoundly more difficult to go from business entities, people, places, and things, to activities with business processes. That's how you get across the silos. That's taken us 50 years to have the data and application logic technology that we can fuse together to do that. But to distinguish how each of these vendors are doing it, Relational AI has a relational knowledge graph, which lets you build the application logic declaratively, like SQL. You say what you want, not how. That makes it order of magnitude or more simpler to express the logic. Celonis is building out business process building blocks so that it's easy for a customer then to just do the little process mining and configuration to build essentially end-to-end business processes. You don't have to do the coding or very much coding because there's a lot of reuse. Palantir has these deep transactional connectors to core systems, and they have these great tools, but you have to do a lot of procedural logic because they're not giving you the application templates. But you can go really deep on core systems. Salesforce has on their data cloud, as we mentioned, essentially the entire customer 360 domain, the customer journey, you know, from engagement to conversion, and all all the information about the customer from all their different touch points. But that's right now, today, in configurable business logic, meaning as long as it fits the Salesforce model, you can express it in metadata. I do want to go back to the Microsoft example, because I know from talking to Microsoft that that metric tree of business outcomes, that is in their vision of how you train and operate agents. But if you think about that metric tree of business outcomes, that is the behavior or business logic of your enterprise. That is a representation of how it's the physics of your business. And it is, I do not see how that connects with Nadella's vision, where you just talk to a bunch of schemas, from your applications without going through your application logic. In other words, you cannot build that metric tree of business outcomes without harmonizing the business logic from across your applications. So I need to be educated on what they are saying, because it doesn't add up for me.
So the frenzy around AI largely has to do with productivity enhancements. And I think at the surface level, people say, okay, well, we're going to be able to do a lot more with a lot less. David Floyer talks a lot about achieving the same outcomes with 1/10 the employees. But how does that manifest itself in terms of taking effect in the enterprise? So that's what we want to talk about here, the massive opportunity that is ahead. And it was explained by Eric Brynjolfsson in a version of this slide, which this slide was annotated by George, and we'll explain that. Essentially, what Brynjolfsson posited is that you've got this, in the history of automation, you've got this power law and a very long tail, like all power laws. And so if you think about the left-hand side of this, the packaged apps, they took a slice of that automation, a lot of back office work and things of that nature. And then we added on customization, custom mods, custom apps, maybe for a specific task that wasn't, broadly horizontal, didn't make sense for, when you think about the leftmost, we're talking about, Salesforce automation or human resource or human capital management or even supply chain or ERP. But then building custom apps on top of that incorporate either proprietary processes or data or maybe vertical industry types of apps or more narrowly within a specific organization. That took up another chunk of automation. But then the long tail, which is really where George here shows AI agents, is where the potential is to drive that 10x productivity. All these workflows that are unautomated today that have an opportunity to be automated on the fly with driving much higher productivity. And that's how it manifests itself, at least how we see it in the enterprise. George, what would you add to this?
Well, like you were saying before about, learning from an exception, when you raised that example that we had used before, where an agent was doing a laptop fulfillment thing for a new hire. It's an onboarding agent, and it couldn't handle all the scenarios. So a supervisor had to add something on. That's an example of that long tail, as that agent reaches things that you couldn't program. That's the point. The agents learn. And at the high end of the left side of that curve were the things that were so high volume that you could program and you could code them essentially deterministically. But at the other end, you're doing the things that are non-deterministic. You're trading determinism for learning, for reaching that long tail. And it's going to take us a long time, essentially, to be able to completely merge those two worlds. But we can't completely drop that first left side, which is what Nadella was talking about. That just, we can put a bridge over it, but we can't drop it completely for agents, because the technology just does not exist, anywhere in the next couple generations, where we would replace all the deterministic rules. and have just the agents talk, 100,000 agents talk to each other and figure out, what they're supposed to do. It would again be a Tower of Babel.
I want to pick up on that and end with a look ahead to 2025 and beyond. As we set up earlier, we expect a lot of agent washing in 2025, a lot of single agents. It's the new buzzword. When you really peel the onion and look at what people are calling, agentic, it's maybe just the beginning of it, and a lot of people are saying, oh yeah, this will be here next year, but there's a lot of work to do. We really see this as we say here, 2 to 10 year journey. It'll start, in 2025, but it's going to take some time to really play out. And one of the concerns that we have is that these vendor-specific agents that we've been talking about within these application silos, they reinforce more stovepipes, and they risk another broken promise by the tech industry. What do we mean by that? Well, you think about Customer 365, you think about the promise of data warehousing, you think about the promise of Hadoop, and many, many others. I mean, a cloud has generally lived up to its performance, so we will give credit there. But so many promises in data that just have been either broken or not fully realized by the industry. And so that's a risk that we see to our scenario. And part of that is we want to avoid so-called paving the cow paths, kind of bolting agents on to existing legacy architecture. Rather, we see the opportunity here, as Jassy was pointing out in his short narrative, to really reinvent the application stack. Nadella touched on it, but as George said, he's kind of skipped over. And in fairness, he did say he wasn't really certain. If you watch the full interview, really wasn't certain how it was all going to play out. So in fairness, I think Nadella recognizes that there is work to be done. But at the end of the day, we're envisioning the necessity for a new application stack in order to support agentic, and that really is the point. Otherwise, we will be paving the cow path, and we won't get that 10x productivity hit, and a lot of people will be disappointed. And the key here is really focus on harmonizing those end-to-end business processes, as George so articulately laid out. That's going to increase the probability of success here. And this last point, vendors are making very different bets. You got the big cloud guys making bets. You've got the data platforms like Snowflake and Databricks, setting down their chips. You have all the application players are involved in this, guys like ServiceNow. We've mentioned a lot, Salesforce, Oracle, SAP we haven't talked about, but they are certainly in the mix as well. George, we're going to ask you to explain one more time how you see this playing out and address the last comment about vendor bets, what that means for buyer bets. And specifically, we have all these, as you said earlier, we got tons of money pouring into agent startups. Are they helping the scenario? Or are they building more silos? You kind of indicated they're going to have to pay a tax to get access to all that business logic that's locked inside of these applications today. So how does this all relate to what you were saying before? Satya skipping some steps. Bring it into focus to help people understand that this is going to take some time, but it's very possible to achieve this if we focus on those pieces that don't exist and make them real. Take it over.
Okay, so just to reiterate, we don't want to pave cow paths. One of the core functions of management is to allocate resources and align the activities of a business in pursuit of business objectives. And that means we have to break down these silos. That's why we're focusing on this harmonization, because it's fine for everyone to want to do what Klarna did and radically reduce the expense of their customer service function. And that is going to be one of the first killer apps of agentic AI. And so will software development. But when you start trying to connect what is now integrated business planning, which is the next generation of like sales and operations planning, where you're looking at all the demand shaping activities, and then you're trying to integrate all your operational planning, that sort of has to look across so many different functions, so many different departments, so many different timescales, and technically it looks across so many different applications. That's why you need the harmonization. Now, to take that down to one example, which will tease a future show, all these customer related applications, customer related agents that are being funded, they're getting like Sierra by the former co-CEO of Salesforce, like a $4 billion valuation to have like brand awareness and sort of a new agentic personality instead of a website, or for your customer service applications. I asked at the Agentforce 2.0 intro, I asked Mark Benioff, I was like, you have Data Cloud, which has all the harmonized customer data in your platform, and you have all these third-party agents who are going to be coming to this API to find the state of the customer so they can interact with the customer through their agent. Is your pricing for these third-party agents going to be higher than just a simple database call that your Tableau or Power BI might expect today? And would it be somewhere between that and the per conversation pricing that your own first-party agents provide? And he said, yes. And this reminds me very much of Zynga and the business they thought they built on top of Facebook, until Facebook came along and said, we'll take a 30% VIG on your business. And I think that represents in a nutshell the value of the platform relative to the value of the agents. And this is a platform that has not just the data about customers, but the semantics. And it's starting, because it's business process metadata driven, it's got steps into the business process harmonization. Not fully there, but that is such a valuable platform that any agent that wants to know about the state of the customer and interact with that customer is going to have to pay a huge VIG to Salesforce. And again, that is an example of why this platform, Salesforce as an example, and more broadly as others arrive, is the most valuable piece of enterprise real estate, not an individual or small team of agents.
Excellent, George. Well, again, it's been a pleasure the last several years working, but especially these last 24 months digging in to some of these changes that have been catalyzed by AI and Gen AI. Really appreciate your time and your thought, and look forward to working with you in 2025.
Thank you, Dave. Looking forward to it as well. Happy holidays.
Thanks, you too. And let us know what you think. How are you seeing this play out? Do you think that 2025 is going to be the year of agentic AI? Do you feel it's going to take much longer? Will it go in step functions? How are organizations going to be able to absorb these, not only the technology, but the processes, and what impact is it going to have on the people? All right, we're going to leave it there for now. Thanks to Alex Morrison and Ken Schiffman on production and in our podcasts. Kristen Martin and Cheryl Knight help get the word out on social media and in our newsletters, and Rob Hof is our EIC over at SiliconANGLE.com. Remember, all these episodes are available as podcasts wherever you listen. Just search Breaking Analysis Podcast. According to Buzzsprout, we hit the top 25% of all podcasts yet again. And I think if you narrow that down to enterprise podcasts, we're probably in the top 5%. So we're super excited about that. I publish each week on thecuberesearch.com and SiliconANGLE.com. And you can email me at david.vellante@SiliconANGLE.com, or DM me at dvellante, or comment on our LinkedIn post. So please do check out ETR.ai, top survey data in the enterprise tech business. This is Dave Vellante for George Gilbert, theCUBE Research Insights powered by ETR. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time on Breaking Analysis.